This is Feminist Wellness, and I'm your host, nurse practitioner, functional medicine expert, and life coach, Victoria Albina. I'll show you how to get unstuck, drop the anxiety, perfectionism, and codependency so you can live from your beautiful heart. Welcome, my love. Let's get started. Hello, my love. I hope this finds you doing so well. I am loving all the summertime things. You know this Leo baby is. We have these 2 blueberry bushes in the backyard, and when I tell you that they have exploded with fruits, I mean exploded. Like quarts and quarts. Like multiple quarts. That's a lot of fruit for 2 little bushes. And in one of the bushes, a robin made her nest. It's really sweet. We have not been going near that bush. Worry not. But it's very sweet. I really feel like Snow White these days. I was meditating in the backyard the other day, and I opened my eyes, and there was not 1, not 2, but 3 bunnies. Like very, very, very close to me. It was like 2 good chunky, medium-sized, good-sized bunners, and then a little baby bunners that I really think could fit in the palm of your hand. It was so amazing. And then there are doves that come in the afternoon. I've been waking up at 6 a lot to really just enjoy the morning hours and to go for a walk and get that beautiful morning sunshine on my face. And the birds at the bird feeder are just going wild at that hour. I often stand at the kitchen window and just stare and stare. And then, I saw a hawk fight. I don't know if it was 2 hawks. It was definitely 1 big hawk and a lot of little birds. And I think the hawk was trying to go for the bird's nest. Circle of life. What are you going to do? But oh my goodness, were they chasing her off? It was wild. Anyway, there's also a groundhog in the backyard, a majillion chippies. I love a little chipmunk. I think it's the racing stripe. This is almost 2 minutes of me talking all about how much I love the menagerie of nature in my backyard. I haven't even gotten to the deers. Suffice it to say, while I do sometimes miss living in Brooklyn, I miss having food available after 8 p.m. I miss the subway. I miss walking everywhere. Art, culture. I mean, there's things I miss. Shopping. This is pretty outstanding. The clean, fresh air. Canadian wildfires aside. The butterflies, the birds. Snacks growing on trees right outside in my yard. The peonies. It's a pretty good time. And my nervous system is so much calmer, more grounded, more settled. Just, it's like this body-wide exhale living up here. So that's my summertime report. This week's episode has absolutely nothing to do with summertime Disney princesses. Absolutely not. Blueberries or wild animals. In fact, it is a conversation with my dear friend and colleague, Trudi Lebron. She's a coach who works in the DEI space, diversity, equity, and inclusion space. She is a psychologist. She is a really great human. And we had been talking, not on the podcast, about the things I talk about here, right? About how our socialization and conditioning creates so much of our emotional outsourcing. And how the popular conversation out there is that if you have these thought habits, that you are sick, there's a defect in your character, that there's something deeply wrong with you. And I just have to say, I could not agree less. And we need to look at environment, at socialization, conditioning, the patriarchy, white settler colonialism, on and on. All the things you hear me talk about here. And so I thought it would be cool to have Trudy come on and talk some more about these things. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Trudy, I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so happy to be here. What's up?
What's up? God, it's so good to see your face and hear your voice.
I know, same.
Yeah, I can't imagine a single human on this planet doesn't know who you are, but just in case.
There are.
Would you take a moment to introduce yourself to the good people?
Sure. My name is Trudi Lebron, and I am an author, a coach, a consultant, many, many things. My work sits at the intersection of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and coaching, the personal development space.
I love the work you do. And I have to tell the good people that I like to call you almost doctora because you have almost finished your doctorate.
Almost.
Which is almost. You're well on your way.
We'll
That's pretty fancy.
It is pretty fancy. You're right. There's still a lot of work to do, but
you're out here being pretty fancy and I'm into it. So
thank you.
So there we go. Yeah. So I brought you on the show because you're amazing and everyone should know about your work. And also because here on Feminist Wellness, I talk so much about how emotional outsourcing, codependent, perfectionist, and people-pleasing thinking habits, ways of being are things that we learned as survival skills, not just in our family of origin, from our ancestral lineage, but also from systems of oppression. And this is the work you do. This is where our work intersects. So I'm excited to talk about this with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it too.
Yeah. So what comes up for you when I say that, right? Like we learn to be codependent because we live in these systems.
Yeah, because we live in these systems. So what comes up for me as a social psychologist, right?
Yeah.
Almost doctora. Almost, is all of the theories around ecological human development, right? Which essentially say, kind of tell us that we exist in these multiple social ecosystems, right? And so if you picture yourself at the middle and all these kind of circles around you, right? You're influenced most by the people who are closest in proximity to you. So that is going to be your friends, your family, then your school, your peers, your, neighbors, things like that. As we go out, we encounter different parts of the world. And eventually we're encountering policies and practices and rules and mass media. And we're noticing trends, and our brains see trends as what is normal, right? And we create norms and we hold and judge ourselves against those norms. So it is an interconnected system of both policies, practices, and institutions, but also all of these kind of just human, energetic, exchanges that help to shape who we are and what we believe about the nature of life, everything, or how we judge right and wrong, how we think about what should and shouldn't be, what we believe about life. Everything is coming from somewhere else.
Right. It makes a lot of sense. And because particularly, I would say for folks living in marginalized bodies, right? Folks assigned female at birth, people of color, queer folks, et cetera, right? There's this story that I am inherently broken because I'm not the white cis straight dude.
Yeah.
Right. That permeates this whole framework of looking at self and other within these ecological systems.
Yeah. I think it starts with white straight dudes. I certainly remember being a young girl feeling marginalized by opportunities to sport. So for example, in the 80s, I know that's so forever ago, right?
We're so Gen X right now.
So yeah, I know.
We're so Gen X. Yeah.
I remember being the only girl playing basketball, in the morning at the the before school basketball program, right?
Right.
And all kinds of things like that, right? So I remember being a girl and not fitting into what other girls looked like or were into, judging that against myself, right? And then as we grow, even academic success, right? I wasn't a good student. I was always, so then I became using those things as information, I'm not good enough, right? I'm not the right kind of girl, right? I'm not a dude. I'm not smart. My parents are biracial. People are always asking me if I am who I say I am, right? All the ways that the world was telling me that I wasn't quote unquote normal or regular or enough. Right. So yeah. So it's easy to start with the big ones, white, rich. Then it's all these other subtle things too about the right kind of person. And just there's so many things. Oh my gosh.
So many layers.
Yeah. There's so many layers.
Yeah. What just popped into my head that I don't know this is going to take us anywhere, but I just want to share it is how there were two South American families in Providence, Rhode Island when I was growing up, the Gonzaleses and us, and they were Ecuadorian, which is hella different from being Argentine. Let me tell you what. And I just remember how othering it felt to be at school, which the Latinos were largely Caribeños, and to speak with my weird ass accent.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I'm other with the white kids, the regular white kids. I am a white Latina, owning that up front. But the regular, I say, my sister and I say regular white kids.
Right.
South American white kids.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But we brought milanesas and steak and weird weird. Empanadas,
Yeah.
South American food for lunch.
Sure.
So it's like mockery for that. But then we also had these like quote unquote weird accents, right?
Yep.
And that being like super othering experience, which definitely added into all the complexity of growing up in a deeply codependent household and people pleasing others and feeling less than and less than and less than and less than.
Yeah. So we're really good at like absorbing narratives from the world around us. And depending on who we are and the identities we hold, and also some like personality traits, right?
Sure.
We either become more susceptible to those narratives or less susceptible. And it just so happens that if the more marginalized identities that you hold, and then on the trait side, we would say like the more risks that you have, right? The more kind of like risks in your life. Yeah. Poverty, factors like that, like all these different kinds of like risks and protective factors. Yeah. You are either more or less, again, susceptible to internalizing those and having either your identity affirmed as like you are what is good and right, and you will be successful in the world, or you will encounter messages that internalize messages that reinforce like the deficit and the way that you are different.
Right. And I really do appreciate that you're speaking to this both in the larger categories, again, like race and class, but also in that like little tiny ways that like, oh, the other girls are thinner than me. The other girls are better dancers. The other girls aren't into basketball. Right.
Yeah. And for me, it's so interesting, like that how young it got wrapped into beauty for me, actually. Because like my mom was like not a girly girl, like, and she was not raising girly girls either. Right. So like, I never knew what to do with my hair. Our clothes like didn't really match. Like we would just kind of like, we didn't have nice shoes. Like our shoes never matched until when my parents got divorced and my father met my stepmother, who was like more of what I would describe as like a typical Puerto Rican, like household wife. She was like, oh no, you can't leave the house like that. Like, let me show you how to blow dry your hair out and put the high bangs and all of that. So eventually, like I got it together and, but
because the higher the hair, the closer to God. I just need to interject.
Absolutely.
To say that.
Yeah.
Go on.
So I distinctly remember going into my 5th grade year as a totally different person.
Wow.
Because like the relationship with my stepmother had shifted because she moved in with my dad. And like, I just had a different kind of feminine presence like in my life. Again, it's not about like the right way or the wrong way, but I now had access to a different way of like being. And that changed the experience that I was able to have at school. So yeah, like that stuff is deep.
It's deep. It's deep because it hits on identity. What do human nervous systems want, right? Significance and belonging. So our negativity bias is always scanning the world to see, how do I not fit in? How am I not the norm? Because that's the shit that'll kill you, right?
Yeah. And the other thing that we do because of that bias is that when we go into places, we look for people that look like us, right? Or we look for people who we perceive are going to share personality traits or cultural traits or something, right? And so when you go in a room and you don't see that, like it is very isolating.
Very isolating, which again makes sense. Like one of the core things in emotional outsourcing is looking to others to validate us, to prove our worth. And so it makes sense if you constantly feel invalidated, right? And like no one else is like you, you don't have significance, you don't have belonging. Of course, you're looking to anyone who can be like, no, you're a good person, you belong, you're okay, like you're good enough.
Yeah.
Like, right. Of course, you're going to give your entire self away all the time to try to source that.
Yeah. And also like you're really susceptible to externalizing, like to looking to external sources for not just people, for your own sense of validity, right? So now you're not good enough on your own. You're good enough because you do great work in the world, or because like make these cool things, or because you are an Instagram influencer, right? So like you attach worth then to these things that we do instead of allowing it to just be, just because you're a human.
Yeah. Right. Which then, of course, leads to more and more grasping, more and more seeking, more and more externalizing.
It's a hamster wheel.
It's a hamster wheel of rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. Yeah. And
it's you have to work very intentionally to get off the hamster wheel because our system is so invested in keeping everybody on it.
Right. Right. For sure. For sure. Yeah. I'm curious then, one of the things I love to do here is get really, really practical, right? And give people remedies. So if someone's listening, they're like, I want to get off. I want to get off this hamster wheel. Where would you invite them to start?
So I always invite people to start, if they haven't done like identity work, to really start there.
Yeah.
And that work is difficult to do unsupported. And it doesn't mean that you need to like hire a coach or do like a big complicated program, but even if it's just with a friend, right? That you're just like thinking about like, what are the different aspects of your identity? What different roles do you have? Like, so the identity can be, I'm biracial Latina, I'm a woman, I'm a, entrepreneur. It could be,
you have great fashion sense.
Right. It could
you
be,
really do.
Thank you. It could also be like, I'm a mom. Right. And like the role that I have assigns me this identity. Right.
Right.
So thinking about all those roles that you hold and those identities that you have and roles that you hold, and then thinking about like what you make those things mean. Ooh. Right. Like, what are you holding yourself accountable to? And do you agree with them? Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. That's the part. What's your reason why? Do you like it? Yeah, it's a big thing I do with my clients is looking at these roles because we didn't sign up for good girl.
Right.
Right. We kind of signed up for good wife, good mother, but
yeah. And what does that mean in the context of, and maybe if it's wife, maybe that conversation happens with your partner, right? Because you also have expectations from your partner and how they're showing up. So that's a reciprocal, right? That is an interpersonal relationship, right? Not an intrapersonal relationship.
Right.
And I think that, and because I made that distinction, I will say that a big part of my work lately has been about teaching people about those different ecosystems and how like we have our intrapersonal relationships and things to like negotiate and work on. But then there are interpersonal things with people, right? That interpersonal sphere. And then there are institutional things, right? Like marriage is an institution and has like agreements, right? And those agreements can be different from person to person. But that's not just like how you feel on any given day. That's about an agreement that you set, right?
Right.
So yeah, there are all these different levels to our environment, and those levels have different implications for like how we show up and how we make decisions and who gets to be involved in transformation, and changes and
and how we believe we should be showing up.
Right.
Right. Because those are the unexamined roles, like an unexamined life keeps us in the same old BS we've always been in. Right. And I think what I would add to this is to look at the have to stories that are aligned with each role. Right. So I am someone's daughter. Therefore, I have to go to holidays if I don't want to. I have to call home on Fridays. I have to take my mom her lunch. I have to see if she took her pills. I have to. What about as a wife, employee, employer, daughter? Right. What narratives of obligation were created for you and assigned to you and taught to you, right? Were you socialized to have, and which have you picked up from your family of origin and which have you imposed on yourself?
This is something that sometimes I get pushed back on, particularly from social justice people, because I am one of these people. I think it's really important to identify when we're making choices, even if the choices are things that we don't agree with or we wish we didn't have to make. So for example, in the context that I'm thinking about this idea that you have to go to dinner, right? For family dinner, or you have to make sure that your mom takes her medication, right? Someone can say, oh yes, I have to, I don't have a choice, because if I don't do it, no one else will. Right? Like, okay. And something bad will happen. Okay. I get all of that. And there is a world where you don't, right? Where you don't check. And then there are negative consequences at the other side of that, for sure. Right? I feel personally that it is more empowering to acknowledge that, yes, I am making a choice, even though I don't like that choice, even though I don't want to have that choice. It does feel like an obligation that I am agreeing to, right? But I am making an active choice, like doing it from a position of active choice, even if you don't like the choice, is more empowering than being like, I just don't have a choice. I'm just going to do this and I don't have a choice. Yeah. So I feel really strongly that like the vast majority of things, there are absolutely choices. And even though some of those choices are like, what we're actually doing is doing things because we're avoiding the negative
The negative
consequences.
outcome. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. For sure. I could not agree more. And for me, that's one of the key and pivotal parts of moving from codependent existence to interdependence based on mutuality and reciprocity. Right. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. My partner likes to say that one of the sexiest things I ever said to her is, I don't need you.
Yeah.
Like in that graspy, right, obligation, heaviness way, but like, let's be interdependent.
Yeah.
Right.
And that breaks so many norms, right? That what we learn about like what relationships are supposed to be and what love is supposed to be and people's desire to feel needed. Yeah. I would much rather be wanted.
Ooh, all day long. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. I think stepping into interdependence would be so much easier without the yoke and the weight of the patriarchy, white settler colonialism, and late stage capitalism.
Yeah, that's very true.
You're like, yeah, okay, done.
Yep, all of that.
Good night. Thank you.
Yeah. Particularly, I was just on a call with some folks talking about, anti-racist business practices and, this balance that people are trying to strike between how do I compensate people well? How do I compensate a team well and, pay myself well and keep prices equitable, keep pricing in check so that like things don't have to cost $1 bajillion.
Right.
And, I think that we are particularly in like the coaching industry, right? We're like really approaching this bubble where so many things have gotten the cost of just labor is so disproportionate from fair market rate for jobs, like in every other like IRL like industry, that it creates a pressure for people to be charging like a lot of money. And it also creates this pressure for people to be earning. And I don't want unrealistic isn't the word, but again, disproportionate.
Yeah. Yeah, I could not agree more. And I wanted to ask you to talk about your new program, if you don't mind, because I just signed up. I think it's amazing. And I mean, also in the wake of what's going on politically. Yeah. Please tell us all about it.
Yeah. So what we do is we certify people in equity-centered coaching and equity-centered leadership. We also do consulting for business owners who want to build businesses that are anti-racist and equity-centered, or work with companies who are already existing to kind of do like more team culture work and, organizational development.
Right. It's so beautiful what you're doing. My brain keeps going back. I studied public health and studied as an epidemiologist and studied social determinants of health. And to not bring that and a DEI lens to coaching, healthcare, teaching, like the reason I bring all of that in, why I bring a feminist lens, an intersectional feminist lens, and the neuroscience is because there's so much shame and stigma that belies legit everything that people are bringing to helpers.
Yeah.
Right. To social workers, to teachers, to coaches, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And shame only lives in the shadows. And so when we're not talking about the impact of race and class and sexuality on how we're showing up, we are inadvertently propagating shame within our clients because there is something they cannot show us. There is something that they don't feel comfortable bringing to their coach, to their teacher, to their whatever. Yeah. Right. Like my sister was a teacher for many years and is now a coach because it's genetic. Talks about like having kids like being really fidgety and not paying attention in school and learning it because they were hungry. Right. Like we all know those stories. Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a shame in there that if you don't have a lens, like I was about to say a Marxist lens because I went to Oberlin in the 90s, but like a class lens, right? You're not going to even think to go there.
Right.
Right. Or a lens that's looking at race or et cetera. So it's really powerful work, Trudy.
Yeah. That's essentially what we're looking to develop is we're looking to help coaches and leaders who are committed to these values, right? We don't want everyone to be a DEI coach, right? We want people to be life coaches and health coaches and wellness and all of these things. And what we're trying to do is build their critical equity lens so that they have that broader context and that they have skills to facilitate those conversations so that they kind of know what to say,
Right.
what to look for and what not to say, and when to pull back and when to lean in. There's a whole host of like skills. And that's why I always say the art and science of coaching, right?
Right.
The science of coaching is the theory, the psychology, the tools that we build. The art is like how you implement and what you see and how you ask the questions and the kind of how you manipulate your energy as a coach and your style as a coach as part of the coaching tool, right? To create space.
Right.
So there's just so much. I just love coaching.
Yeah,
so much.
It's so exciting. I'm also thinking about for coaches and beyond, what this beautiful work does is helps shine the lens first and foremost on ourselves and what we are carrying and what's internalized that we may not even notice, right? Like that we, of course, bring into every room we walk into.
Totally.
Right? Like I had no idea I was living from so much codependent thinking until it hit me like a freaking sledgehammer.
Yeah.
No idea I was people pleasing and being a perfection. No clue. I just thought I was like being polite and being like nice instead. Right. Oops.
It's a critical practice that allows you to check that for yourself. So one of the competencies of equity-centered coaches, so what we kind of evaluate in our certified students and what we'll start to train people on is actually building a reflexivity practice, building the ability to not just kind of be self-aware, but to analyze your own behavior and your own bias and identify when those things are coming up. It is because I have a very strong reflexivity practice that I was able to say, how do I feel about essentially gatekeeping this important information behind a program that costs over $10,000 and requires a year of people's time? Like, why did I make that choice to do it that way? What are the implications of that? What are the implications of changing it? Is it in integrity with my values? And then coming to the conclusion of like, oh no, I actually do feel really aligned with offering a certification because there's a fidelity to the model and like there's a certain quality or rigor that comes from certification. And like there are some basics of this that are so important that I want as many people as possible to have them. Right. But it is because that reflexivity practice that I was able to kind of say like, oh, because every coach I've ever had and, you know, would probably, you can't unbundle your certification right? Yeah. But of course we can. Of course we can. Of course colleges are exactly built this way. Like, and we want to be an educational institution. I'm not playing this like coaching mastermind game with people. Like this is not, like this is a school. This is an educational institution.
I love that. Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Thank you for doing that. And I'm excited. I'm excited to start coming to the workshops. Trudy, what you're doing here is amazing. And I'll say it revolutionary. And most of my audience are not coaches, but they are people who are listening to a show called Feminist Wellness, right? And they care and they want to bring DEI into their lives. Can they sign up?
100% they can. So I will say, I use the word coach a lot. We use coach to really describe anyone who's doing work with other humans.
Yeah.
If you're a teacher, a social worker, advocate, if you're volunteering at, a soup kitchen,
library,
like the library, wherever, like if you're a parent, right? That these are skills. I don't think of coaching as a profession. I mean, it is a profession, but I also think of it primarily as a skill that we can use to be in community with people. So 100%.
Yeah. I doubt that anybody listening to this show who clicked on this episode with your name on it doesn't understand why this matters.
Yeah.
And I think they need talking points for when they go home and, their racist uncles at the table, or you know what I mean? They're like that aunt who's like, well, this woke business. I think it'd be really helpful for folks to particularly remember we're talking to people with people-pleasing habits who don't historically shy away from conflict, who aren't trying to rock the boat, but let's give them some scripts. Right? What are some entry points to like having these conversations? Like, how do we have the talks?
Yeah. So first of all, if you're, going and having Thanksgiving with your, racist uncle, like that's not the time probably to like have a whole processing around trying to change someone's mind. And also like the work, sometimes it's not about changing people's minds. Sometimes you have to set a boundary and just to protect yourself to be like, that's not a conversation we're having. So especially because right now we have such a campaign really against diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have an entire political party who is really committed to this like quote unquote like anti-woke nonsense, right?
Nonsense.
And what they are trying to do is to get people to believe that diversity, equity, inclusion, liberation, anti-oppression, any of that kind of body of work is somehow pushing an anti-white agenda, right? An anti-white, an anti-straight, anti-cis agenda. And that is what they really want people to believe. They either really want people to believe that, or they want people to become so confused and tired of this conversation and desensitized, yes, that they check out. Because if you check out, then you're not paying attention. And then people can, continue to make all the policy changes that they are trying to implement. And like everything is equity issues. Like diversity, equity, and inclusion has forever been protecting all people. Some of the biggest benefactors of DEI work have been white women, particularly in the workforce, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it is not a big jump to go from a ruling that's fine for companies to no longer serve LGBTQ plus, families.
Right.
There's not a big jump from that to that we see signs again that say like no blacks allowed.
Right.
Or, that interracial marriage becomes a question and gay marriage becomes a question. And not a far jump from that religious freedom.
Oh yeah. I mean, Dobbs is scary enough, right?
Yeah. That's the trajectory that we're on. And so it is not much farther than that before. It's like, you know what, women, I think maybe your place is in the home.
Right.
Barefoot and pregnant, right? Like that is literally the consequences that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Things that we, for decades, thought were fundamental human rights are up for debate at this moment.
Listen, to be all, Octavia warned us, right? I mean, Octavia warned us.
Yeah.
Margaret Atwood warned us. Rachel Carson also warned us, but
that is
warned.
Octavia Butler's work is so prophetic that it's scary.
Horrifying.
So much.
If you haven't read Parable of the Sower, get thee to your local family-owned independent bookstore. Get a copy.
Yeah.
Indie Bound is how you get it ordered to your house.
And please don't stop there. Please don't. To really blow your mind, read Parable of the Talents.
Yes.
The second book in the series, which I have to say that this isn't too much of a spoiler, but I just want you to understand that she has a character in that book who runs a campaign with the slogan, "Make America Great Again."
Yep.
Okay. I can say that without giving too much away.
No.
When I say prophetic, it's scary.
Yep.
She had a time machine.
Yep.
And went into the future and just.
Yeah. And told us what's up. And we need to listen. Right. And we need to do this work within ourselves, around our own identities, around raising our own voices, around our interpersonal and our families of origin, right? Around the 5 nervous systems we're around the most, right? At work, right? And then we need to go to the library board, right? Because that's where they're starting. The school board, the library board, right? That's how insidious this is. Banning books.
And it's at the local level too, where a lot of protections can be enacted.
Yes.
So where, the government, the federal government is making these, I live in Connecticut, which is a really solidly blue state. And so people in Connecticut are like, okay, well, what does this mean for us? And how can we make sure that these things don't happen here?
Right.
Right. So the local level is where the day-to-day impacts of those policies are felt.
Right.
So certainly getting involved.
Right. Which again, to zoom it back to the nervous system, we need to have the capacity within our nervous systems to trust ourselves that we know what's right, to believe in ourselves and our opinions, to feel safe raising our voices, right? Having opinions publicly or even privately or even in our own journals.
I want to say for people who are listening, who are, having these ideas and feel like they want to communicate those ideas, thinking about a writing practice, even if it's messy and just on a new Substack newsletter or something, but participating in the conversation. Yeah. You don't have to position yourself as an expert. You can position it as here are my thoughts and here are my perspectives. And, maybe you are an expert in your field. So how does this become incorporated into your thought leadership work? Whether that happens to be in human services or education or tech or whatever, right? There's people, and this work needs to seep into all, all places.
What just came to me really strongly is one of my favorite parts of this community, of the feminist wellness community, is that we are all tenderoni. I call them my tender ravioli because we've all had these sweet little cheesy centers, soft centers. And we're a bunch of really tender human animals who, by and large, are out here trying to be kind and loving and caring, right? And we have trouble parsing that out from codependency and obligation and but at the end of the day, we're all about love and presence and intentionality. And the personal is political.
Yeah.
Right. So if your goal is to be kind within your own home and your family and to your kids, and let's kick that out a level, right?
Totally.
Another and another and another, and learning about equality, equity, inclusion, diversity. These things are part of being a kind person in the world, in my opinion.
And also building a practice around like patience. Patience is a big one because I feel like a lot of the violations of humanity, especially between people who don't know each other, come from this like urgency. Like people want people to like hurry up at the store and like, move from the light and this is taking too long and like just chill out, like practice patience. And notice, this is again, another reflexivity practice. Like notice when you start to get anxious about something and just say, what is triggering this right now?
Right.
Like, am I in a rush to get somewhere?
Right.
Am I stressed out about this other thing that's actually not even related that I was just thinking about? Did I get a phone call that like annoyed me? Like really assessing like, where is that coming from? And also like asking, where do things need to be solved? Like at what level do things need to be solved? Is this a problem that this person in front of me can solve? Or like, am I just yelling at this person because they're a warm body and I'm just upset right now, right? Like, I think patience is such a key part of like building an equity practice that we don't talk about enough.
We don't, right? Because what it comes down to is anti-violence at its core, right?
Totally.
Right.
Urgency works against that. Like you need to be able to go slow.
Well, urgency is a tool of white supremacy for sure.
Yeah.
That people don't think about.
Yeah.
And it impacts all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because from urgency, we don't see our own humanity or that of those around us.
Or others. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Trudy, I adore you.
I adore you too. Thank you.
You're so wonderful. I'm really grateful to call you my hermana. Like I'm grateful to be friends and in community with you. And I'm really grateful for the work you do in the world. I'm really grateful for the books you've written. Your anti-racist business book, amazing.
Yes, thank you.
You know, I bought like 400 copies.
Oh my God, did you?
I bought so many copies.
So many.
Yeah, it was a good Christmas. It was a good, yeah. And this new project is incredible. And I'm grateful that I get to be a part of it,
Well,
and learn from you and your team. Yeah.
We'll make sure to keep you posted on all the new things that are coming up. And
we'll put it in the show notes.
Yes.
For sure. Great. Any last parting words? Anything you want to make sure the good people know and hear?
Yes. I just want to really urge people again, as we go into this like really charged kind of political season where there's going to be a lot of language thrown around about what diversity, equity, and inclusion is and what anti-racism is. I want people to please try and be an advocate for this work and sending the message that diversity, equity, and inclusion work is about protecting everyone from abuses of power. That essentially is what that work is about. And if we compromise that for some, we're compromising that for everyone.
So powerful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being wonderful. Thank you so much for listening, my love. That was such a fun conversation. Trudy is so great. And talking to her really just is so expansive. Like it expands my mind and reminds me to always question my thinking, always be asking how I can do things in a way that is of greater service to myself and the world. And I'm really grateful for her perspective, her kindness, her thoughtfulness, and her friendship. Thank you, Trudy. Thanks for all you do. And thanks for being you. All right, my love, thank you for being you. I'm glad you're you. I'm glad you were born. If no one's told you today that you are really very special and perfect and amazing and worthy of love and care simply because you were born, I'd like to be the first, because it's true. You're magnificent. Yeah, you. I'm looking at you, you tender ravioli. Looking right at you. Oh, my love. Thank you for listening. If you're loving the show, you know what to do. Share it with your friends, share it on social media, and tag me. Head on over to wherever you get your podcast, but particularly Apple Podcasts. Leave a 5-star rating and a written review, and it can legit be one line, like, oh my God, I love this podcast. But please, just take a moment to do that. And the reason I ask you to do that, though I haven't in quite a while, but the reason is because the more ratings and reviews a show has, the higher it ranks in Apple Podcasts, and then it shows up more frequently in search. And the reason I do this podcast is to be of service. I have had such enormous privilege, educational privilege, that I've been able to study. I've been studying the nervous system for 20 years, all these certifications, all these courses, all this everything. And I'm really grateful for all this knowledge. And I know that, like we were talking about with Trudy, not everyone has access to this material. And so I want to share it in digestible, understandable ways, which is what we're here doing, right? So when you give it a rating and review, you make it easier for others to find and access this free content. So please take a moment. All right, let's do what we do. Gentle hand on your heart should you feel so moved. And remember, you are safe. You are held. You are loved. And when one of us heals, we help heal the world. Be well, my darling. I'll talk to you soon. If you've been enjoying the show and learning a ton, it's time to apply it with my expert guidance so you can live life with intention without the anxiety, overwhelm, and resentment so you can get unstuck. You're not going to want to miss the opportunity to join my exclusive, intimate group coaching program. So head on over to victoriaalbina.com/masterclass to grab your seat now. See you there. It's going to be a good one.